So these, the four bodies directly correspond in this model to the four states. So when we're in the physical body, we're in connection with the outer world. And we define that as the waking state. So in this state, the physical body is active, the prana is active, the mind is active. We're fully alive, the senses are active, we're connected to the outer world. When we enter, our consciousness enters into the dream state, we withdraw our awareness of the physical world. So we no longer have consciousness of the physical body. We're now in a completely subjective experience where it's whatever appears has no connection to the outer world, but it's completely generated by our inner awareness. So the deep sleep state is associated with the subtle body. So in the subtle body, we still have the organs of perception. We can still see, and we can still hear, and we can still feel, and in our dreams we can move, and we can relate to characters, but they're purely internal. So we are all of the characters in our dream. When we go into the deep sleep states, we refer to this as the causal body, where the only thing that's functioning within us is the prana. The life force continues, we continue to breathe. But the mind is quiet, the physical body is disconnected, we're disconnected from that awareness, we don't feel pain. That's why if we have an injury and we're suffering pain, we can't feel it when we're sleeping, right? So we go unconscious. But this unconscious state is, or a state of no mind or no vrittis, there is one subtle vritti that continues, and we call this the veil of illusion. I was my younger days, I was a video producer. And in those days, we had analog tape. And so what we used to do is pre-record the tape with black. We would lay down a track of black and then record over it so that we would get a pure picture. We wouldn't have any snow showing up in the picture. So you could say we were recording nothing, but in reality, we were recording black. We were recording something. And so in the deep sleep state, there are no conscious thoughts, but we're not having a direct experience of the self. We're in a state of the void. We're in a state of darkness where the five kanchukas, the five primary limitations, still exist. You could think of this as the veil of illusion or Maya. It still exists. We're recording that. Once the veil is removed and we can remain conscious, then we can have a direct experience of the fourth body, which I'll call it the supracausal body, or the light of our own being, which is both prakasha and vimarsha. It's existence and it's an awareness that we exist. Sat Chidananda, being, consciousness, and bliss. So we think about the physical body breathes oxygen, right? We take in air and we breathe oxygen. The subtle body, it's prana. Prana, it's the life force that circulates through the body and keeps us alive. If we think about the primal prana with a capital P as the life force itself, as the first involution of universal consciousness, it takes the form of prana. We call that life. When that life leaves the physical body, we're gone. We're just a corpse. So this causal body has a structure, very subtle structure. It consists of the primal ignorance. So when we go into this deep sleep state, we still have within us the belief that we're somehow separate, that we're imperfect, that we're not whole, and that there's a separate reality that we're separate from. And it's this shared structural belief that all human beings have in common that is the cause of the manifestation of an individual, the manifestation of a subtle body and a body that demonstrates in the physical reality that it is separate, that it's imperfect, that it's not whole. And so once we have the belief that I'm not whole, I'm separate from Supreme Consciousness, and that there's a world out there that I'm separate from, then we begin to act as if that's true. And that's the law of karma. So this causal body is not nothing. It's a structure in consciousness. It's a structure of limitation. You could think of it as what we would call in the yoga tradition, Maya and the five Kanchukas. It's the veiling power of Supreme Consciousness. We enter into that and experience it as a void, as a kind of nothing. So when we're in deep sleep, we can be aware that we're in deep sleep, that there are no conscious thoughts. And there are different levels of thought. You know, in our tradition, we talk about 4 basic levels of thought. We have a term for this, we call it the Matrika Shakti. So the Matra means mother. Ka means ununderstood. So the ununderstood mother, meaning Maya, or the power of sound, has 4 levels. The highest level we call the level of Para. And this is said to be the simple awareness, without thought, just simply the awareness of our own being. It's thought to be a thought because there's a movement of energy, there's a sound, as it were. And as this awareness has a desire or a willingness to come into manifestation, it begins to show itself as the 50 primal sounds of the Sanskrit alphabet. This is called the level of Pasyanti. This is a very subtle level, you could say, of sound or as thought. As those 50 primal sounds joined together, they form words which represent ideas. And so in this process of manifestation, the thought slowly emerges from pure being. From nothingness comes a thought. Isn't this your experience? From nothingness, suddenly there's an emergence of energy. And sometimes we can actually feel that energy before it takes thought. I don't know if you've ever had a kind of an inspiration where you've been contemplating a question or looking for an idea, and there's a bubbling up, there's an awareness. You can actually feel or see the thought before it takes shape. This is at the level of pasyanti, of inspiration. Then it comes into manifestation at the level of the mind. We call this madhyama, where it takes the form of either a word or a sound, or sometimes it can become an image or a picture, but it's fully blown in the mind, and then it can be expressed as a word, as a sentence, as an idea, or as a piece of music or a piece of art. So we always go through these 4 levels, from pure stillness, awareness, inspiration, takes a form. If we are truly at the very deepest part of our being, pure consciousness, that's who we really are, then we're all of this. Then we're this human being, but I'm also that human being. I'm also a butterfly. I'm also a tiger. That I am all of this. So in meditation or in deep sleep, we can suddenly have an experience of that. You know, when I had that particular dream, when I came back from the dream, I didn't know which of the realities was real. Was I a soldier having a dream that I was David in this world? Or am I David who had a dream that I was a soldier? And my sense is that it's both and. That we can as consciousness, we're all of these realities. We're all of these different perspectives that once we become one with universal consciousness, we can have the experience of being all of these beings simultaneous, having multiple experiences in possibly in multiple universes, all simultaneously. I had an experience with you, I'll share. Muktananda used to give these 2-day programs called intensives where he would give Shaktipat to people and we would go into deep samadhi. And I was on his staff at the time, and my job was to operate the sound system. So I would turn the mics on and off, and when we meditated, Baba always wanted us to turn the sound completely off. And I had a little sort of timer. At the end of 60 minutes, it would ding, and that would be my clue to turn the system back on so everybody could hear. So this particular time, Muktananda came around, touched me on the forehead, hit me with the peacock feathers, and I went into the deepest samadhi, where there were just no thoughts, no awareness of the body, no thoughts, just pure awareness, pure being. And an hour just flew by. I completely lost all sense of time. And the timer went off, which indicated it was time for me my job was to turn the system back on. But I was in a state of universal consciousness and couldn't distinguish the sound. But I recognized that there was something happening out there that I needed to become conscious of. So I remember choosing to descend from the state of pure awareness and allow myself to contract in order to do what needed to be done. And I remember my consciousness coming back to an awareness of the mind, of being in a body, in a mind. But I didn't know what I was to do. I had to actually look around in my own consciousness for a memory. And I activated my memory. The memory allowed me to remember that I was sitting in an intensive and it was my job to operate the sound system. I had to actually activate my sense of hearing to hear the timer. Once I heard that, I recognized it was time to turn it off, and I needed to activate my physical body to go and turn it off. And I came back, and I recall that in that moment of stillness, of just pure awareness of mind, but not having any active memory, I honestly didn't know if I was a man or a woman or who I was. It was just simply pure consciousness. And I had a sort of awareness of just dropping in to this awareness. You know, when I had the dream of being a soldier, I had the same experience. When I came back from being a soldier and entered into this body, I remember thinking that I'm pure consciousness, and I've now entered into a body, and this body has memories of having lived for 70 years. And not being sure if I had actually lived personally those 70 years, or whether as consciousness I had just dropped back into a body that had a memory of it. So as consciousness, we can live multiple lives simultaneously. And if all time is in the present, there's really no difference between a past life and a future life and this one. We live them all in an instant. Essence, body. See, deep sleep and samadhi are very closely related. The difference is that in samadhi, we remain fully conscious of our own being. That's why we need to train ourselves to meditate. It's one of the reasons we sit. We try to sit when we meditate, because when we lie down, you can meditate lying down. Shavasana is wonderful. But our tendency, our habit is when we're lying down and we have no thoughts, what happens? We go to sleep. We lose consciousness. We go into the deep sleep state. What we're practicing is to remain conscious even in deep sleep. And once we experience that, that's true meditation. That's samadhi. So we sit, we discover our essence, the very core of our being. Then we hold on to that experience. We practice holding on to it. There's a Sanskrit term which is vyutana. Vyutana means the afterglow of meditation. When we come out of meditation, we're filled with energy, we're filled with Shakti, we're filled with light, and then for most of us that experience gradually dissipates as we enter our waking state in our daily life. For a yogi, they learn how to hold on to this awareness, to remain in samadhi, be fully conscious of their own being, and to live and be active in the world. So this is a difference in terms between Atma Vyapti and Shiva Vyapti. So when we go into this samadhi state, we're experiencing the essence of our own being. Once we become established in that, we call that Atma Vyapti. We can experience it in meditation in the cave. The next stage in our spiritual development is when we're able to hold that consciousness, that awareness, when we're in the waking state. The analogy that they use in the Shiva Sutras is that it's like having two vessels of oil. Suppose we have a bottle and we're pouring oil into a decanter. It's a nice, slow, gradual filling. So think about samadhi being poured, that awareness, that consciousness being poured into the waking state without leaking, being able to contain it, to be able to live in that permanent awareness. And I've seen someone who lives in that state. When I lived with Muktananda, I was his master of ceremonies in his program, and we were in Oakland, California, which was a really rough part of town at the time. And my Baba was giving darshan. People would come up and give him gifts and greet him. And as I say, it was a really rough part of town. There were a lot of drug dealers and drug addicts and things that were there. And I noticed this fellow on the line, and he looked really anxious and nervous and disheveled, and he looked a little bit crazy. I wasn't sure what was going on. But when he came and presented himself to Baba, he bowed down and he pulled out a pistol and held it up to Muktananda and said, "You talk about love, you talk about bliss. What if I pulled this trigger and shot you?" And my Baba leaned forward without any hesitation, put his arms around the man, pulled him into his lap and said, "I would love you even as you were pulling the trigger." There was never a moment of losing the state of awareness of his own being. And he radiated that, and that man became a great disciple. Was transformed in an instant. So it is possible to learn to live in this state of ananda, of supreme bliss. Paramananda. There's a sutra in Shaivism that says, Lokananda Samadhi Sukham, which is that samadhi, the true samadhi, is in the place where you are, in the marketplace, at your job, with your family. It's not something, you don't need to go to a cave, you don't need to go to an ashram, you don't even need to go into meditation, but wherever you are, that's samadhi. That's the goal of this. We call that Shiva Vyapti.